If you spend any time in the chronic illness communities, we're talking Lyme disease, long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmune disorders, you start seeing the same story again and again. Someone gets sick, they search for answers, they try treatments, they see a few doctors, maybe they improve a little, then they relapse. Years pass. And eventually they ask a very painful question. Why am I still sick? Not weeks, not months, years, sometimes 5 years, and sometimes 10, sometimes even longer. And if you talk to people who've lived through this, you notice something strange. Many of them are doing everything they're told to do. They're eating so carefully. They're trying all sorts of supplements. They're seeing specialists. They're experimenting with protocols. They are trying incredibly hard to get better, yet they remain stuck. So what's going on? Why do so many people remain trapped in chronic illness for years? Today I want to walk through something that most conversations about chronic illness miss completely. Because the answer usually isn't about a single infection or a single toxin or a single missing nutrient. The real reason people stay sick is usually much more fundamental. It has to do with energy. Let's start with something that's almost every chronic illness person has in common. We're talking fatigue. Not just feeling a little tired after a long day, but the kind of fatigue where your body feels heavy. Your brain struggles to think, and even small activities feel completely draining. This kind of fatigue tells us something important. Your cells are struggling to produce energy. Inside your cells are structures that are called mitochondria, and their job is to produce ATP. ATP is this energy molecule that powers almost every process in your body. Muscle contraction, immune function, detoxification, even brain activity and cellular repair. Everything requires ATP. And without it, cells can't perform their normal functions. Now here's where things become important. Mitochondria don't just produce energy in isolation. They require several key inputs. They require nutrients, they require functioning metabolic pathways, and they need one thing above all else: oxygen. Oxygen is the final ingredient in the process your mitochondria use to generate energy. Without enough oxygen, energy production slows. When energy production slows, cells start struggling. And when enough cells struggle, you begin to experience the symptoms. We're talking fatigue, brain fog, poor recovery, muscle weakness, and immune dysfunction. But here's the part most treatment approaches overlook. Even if you address the infections and the toxins and the inflammation, these therapies often rely on something the body may not have enough of: energy. Because healing itself is very energy intensive. Your immune system requires energy to fight infections. Your detox pathways require energy to clear those toxins. Your tissues require energy to repair damage. If the body's energy system is impaired, those recovery processes become extremely difficult. And that's when people begin to get stuck. There's a whole nother layer to this, and it has to do with circulation. Your cells need oxygen to produce energy, but oxygen has to reach the cells first. That delivery happens through your circulatory system, but more specifically through an incredibly delicate network of microscopic vessels called capillaries. These capillaries deliver oxygen directly to your tissues. In many chronic illnesses, these tiny vessels don't function normally. Inflammation can damage the lining of the blood vessels. Immune activation can impair the lining called endothelial cells. Infections and toxins can disrupt microcirculation. When those tiny vessels stop delivering oxygen efficiently, cells receive less. When cells receive less oxygen, mitochondria produces less energy. And when mitochondria produce less energy, the healing process begins to stall. At that point, you enter a difficult cycle. Energy production drops, healing slows, inflammation persists, circulation remains impaired, and of course, symptoms just continue. This is one reason people can treat symptoms for years without fully recovering, because the foundation of cellular energy has not been restored. Now let's talk about something else that keeps people stuck: the brain. The brain constantly monitors energy state of your body. And when energy production begins to drop, the brain detects that change, and it responds in a very specific way. It begins sending signals to the body to slow down. It gives us signals of fatigue, reduced motivation, brain fog. And these aren't random symptoms. They're actually a protective signal. The brain is essentially saying, we don't have enough energy to keep up operating at full speed, so start limiting activity. Reduce movement, reduce cognitive load, conserve whatever energy remains, that response can be very helpful in the short term. But if the underlying energy deficit persists, those signals, they become chronic. And that's why people begin to feel like their body is permanently stuck in like a low power mode. Even when they want to push forward, their brain keeps pushing them back. This is why people with chronic illness often feel trapped. They're not lacking motivation or discipline. Their energy system itself is constrained. And until that constraint is addressed, recovery becomes extremely difficult. Now, before we continue, I want to share a resource that explains this system more deeply, because once you understand how oxygen delivery, circulation, and mitochondrial function interact, many chronic illness patterns start to make much more sense. We put together a guide called The Synergistic Power of Exercise with Oxygen Therapy and Red Light Therapy. In the guide, we explain how improving oxygen availability and supporting mitochondrial activity together can help restore cellular energy production. If you'd like to read it, you can get it down below. Now let's come back to the big picture. Why do people stay sick for years? There are several reasons, but one of the most common is that treatment approaches focus on individual problems instead of foundational systems. People chase one infection, then another, or they chase a detox protocol, or they chase inflammation, all for the right reasons, but the underlying cellular energy system remains impaired. Those treatments often produce only temporary improvements because the body simply doesn't have enough energy to fully repair itself. This is also why people experience cycles. They improve for a while, then they relapse, they improve again, and they relapse again. The deeper issues remain unresolved. The energy system hasn't fully recovered. And until that system is restored, the body can remain stuck in a prolonged state of dysfunction. Now, this leads us to another important insight. Recovery from chronic illness isn't about finding one magic treatment. It's about restoring the systems that allow the body to heal itself. Circulation, oxygen delivery, cellular energy production. When those systems begin to improve, the body gains access to something it desperately needs: energy. And with enough energy, many repair processes can finally begin to move forward again. But there's one more important piece in this puzzle, because when your body enters an energy deficit state, your brain, it actually responds in a very specific way. And that response is one of the most misunderstood symptoms in chronic illness. We're talking fatigue, the feeling of being tired all the time, not just sleepy, but deeply exhausted. There's actually a very specific reason your brain produces that signal. And when you understand it, chronic fatigue suddenly starts to make much more sense. So if you want to understand why your brain be making you feel exhausted all the time, watch this next video. Tired all the time, your brain might be telling you something. I'll see you there. Thank you.